Alright, so this is going to be around reuse with Nintex RPA version 2 or 102 or 201. So what I did in the previous video was basically show you how you can create multiple tasks and have your main task kind of call those to do some work. And that way, instead of building all that logic into the main flow of your bot flow, instead you break it up into these individual tasks. So what I want to do is actually show you now that you can actually do a design where a task calls another task, or like a flow calls another flow. So over here we have a very simple looking flow. We are setting a variable which is radius to 4, and then we're running a task to calculate the circumference and running another task to calculate the area. Now, for those who are aware or who might not be aware, in order to calculate circumference of a circle or the area of a circle, you need to use the value of pi, which is 3.14 something, right? Now, that is a constant. So what I'm doing here, you probably don't need to do all the time, but I just wanted to show you how you could do this if you want to do it this way. So for the first one, calculate circumference. I'm going to click in here, and there's my calculate circumference. It just has two actions in here. One is it runs another task, which calculates pi, and then it runs a calculate formula to actually use that value of pi, multiply it by 2, multiply it by the radius, and you get the circumference, right? Now, if I look at calculate pi, that task, it's pretty simple. It's just 22 divided by 7, right? So that's like a simple way of calculating pi. So you don't really need a separate task to do this, but the idea is just to show you that in calculate circumference, we can run this task, and then in calculate area, we can run this task as well. Like I said, in most cases, you probably don't need to do that. You can just set the value at the beginning and just have them, have the different tasks use that particular variable. But the idea is just to show you that you can have one task calling another task. So in some situations, you may have, a particular bit of logic that needs to be reused throughout your bot flow, but can also be reused throughout other tasks. So then again, you can actually break this up into these little subtasks and have one call the other to do, whatever calculations or run formulas or do really whatever type of logic that you need it to do in regards to having a bot do the work. So that's kind of like the really simple way of me showing it to you. But like I said, in most cases, you're not going to have a separate task for one formula. You're probably going to have one for several actions in here, maybe 2, maybe 10, maybe 20 actions, whatever it is. And then your other tasks can actually call it to do its thing. One of the other great reasons, other than just reuse, is that you can actually go into your task, make a modification in here, and it's going to affect everything else that calls it. So again, you have that central place of logic that you can make changes to. That's going to affect the entire bot flow as it runs. So just so you guys are aware, this is a really cool way or at least a good design methodology for building out your bot flow. So you don't have a ton of logic all within one particular bot flow task, and then it just becomes really confusing. Now, since I'm already here, what I do want to actually cover, because we've covered this particular part, is what I did in the previous video was I right-clicked on some actions and I went color, and I did something like this and then did something like that for a different one. Now, this is actually really handy to be able to do this because it allows you to kind of separate bits of logic and you can actually point them out really easily. Remember, very similar to workflow design, when you build out your bot flows, you want to make sure that other people can go in here and actually read it and see what this actually does. Because if you think about, once you've built this out, later on, hopefully you get a promotion or you move into a different role, maybe outside the particular business unit that you're in right now. You want your colleagues to be able to go in here and know exactly what this is doing. So for example, here, although I've defined or named my task calculate circumference, it's pretty straightforward. But what I might want to do is right click on here and also add a note and say, for a circle. For this one, I'll do the same thing. Oops, there we go. And the reason why you'd want to do something like that is that when it comes to actually saying what am I calculating the circumference of? Sometimes you might be looking at an ellipse, right? It's a little different to a circle. So you really want to like log or at least note what this stuff is actually doing, and that'll help your colleagues as well later on, and it'll help you as well. One of the other things that I've started to do in some of the bigger bot flows that I've built is actually insert, like going into, say, this particular action here, this set variable, and I go into, where is it, under tools, and I will go line, and it doesn't really do anything other than draw a line, and I'll do the same thing here, tools, line. And that way, I can actually break these up and say, let's just change the color to blue. Right? And then you can go, okay, well, what else can I do to make this a little bit easier for me to understand? I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add a note, and I'm going to say, do my circle calculations. There we go. And that kind of defines it at the top to say this is what all of this is doing, and then you might even want to do something like that as well. It's really up to you how you do this, but it's going to make things a little bit easier for you and your team members to actually know exactly, what your bot flow is doing. Like I said, for smaller ones, you probably don't need to worry as much as long as you name things the way they should be named. That's legible. But as your bot flow gets bigger and bigger, definitely look into making it a lot easier for you to maintain this over time, and then for your colleagues to come in and maintain it as well, because things change. As you guys know, with RPA, sometimes you're doing some screen scraping, sometimes you're pulling in some information from a website. Those things do change, which will require you to go in here and make some changes. So the easier you can make it for yourself and for your colleagues, the better, and it'll be a way nicer user experience of the actual tool itself. All right, hope this helps. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. If you have some other suggestions or recommendations on how you guys build your bot flows to make things a little bit easier for yourselves, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for your time.